You weren't born into a life. You were born into a pattern, a rhythm already in motion, a script already written, not in ink, but in silence. And every choice you thought was yours was already echoing someone else's fear. Have you ever looked back at your life and asked, why do I keep ending up in the same emotional place? Why do I attract the same kind of people, the same pain, wearing different faces? Why does it feel like I've been living a role that I didn't choose? Carl Jung believed that the greatest danger to your freedom isn't outside of you. It's buried deep in your unconscious, in the stories you inherited, but never examined. He called them archetypes, universal psychic patterns that shape the way we think, feel, and react, before we even know it's happening. And when these archetypes get buried in the shadow, they don't die. They live through you. They influence the people you trust, the dreams you abandon, the limits you think are yours. You don't see them, but you feel them. And the most dangerous ones are the ones you never even knew were there. Today we'll explore 4 shadow archetypes that might be running your life without your permission, not to shame you, but to free you. Because what you can't see, you can't change. And what you can't name will keep pulling the strings. There are parts of you were told not to be. Parts that felt too angry, too needy, too wild, too loud, too strange. So you hid them, not out of weakness, but out of survival. You smiled when you wanted to scream. You stayed when you wanted to run. You became who they needed and forgot who you were. Carl Jung called this hidden self the shadow, not because it's evil, but because it lives in the dark, in the places you've never looked. The shadow is everything you had to abandon to be accepted, to be safe, to be loved. But what's buried doesn't die. It festers, it waits, it finds another way out, through your triggers, your addictions, your self-sabotage, your pain that repeats itself again and again. But the shadow isn't just emotion, it's intelligent. It speaks in patterns. It moves through symbols. It wears masks called archetypes. These aren't just ideas. They're living forces, blueprints of identity passed down through generations. The hero, the orphan, the victim, the rebel, the healer, the fool. Each one carries energy, and each one carries a cost when it remains unconscious. Because if you don't know the role you've been cast in, you'll confuse survival for selfhood and performance for personality. Shadow work isn't about fixing yourself. It's about remembering what you buried and meeting it with compassion instead of fear. Because you can't outrun what lives inside you, but you can turn and face it before it decides for you. There is a voice in you that says, "It always ends like this. No one ever really sees me. I don't deserve this, but maybe I do." It doesn't shout. It sighs. It comes after the silence, after the apology you never received, after the trust you gave was broken. Again, this is the victim, not weak, not dramatic, not a lie, but a part of you that was truly wounded and never witnessed. The victim lives in the shadow because it wasn't safe to grieve out loud, because someone told you to be strong when all you wanted was to be held. So you turned your pain into a pattern, into proof that no one can be trusted, proof that love is dangerous, proof that your voice doesn't matter. But here's what no one tells you. The victim doesn't just hold pain, it holds power. Power you had to give away to stay protected. And when that power remains unconscious, it turns into a script. You become the one who's always overlooked, always wronged, always just unlucky. You attract those who reinforce the wound, You sabotage the moments that feel too easy. You push away the love you claim to crave. Why? Because the pain is familiar, and the familiar feels safe. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The victim doesn't want to hurt you. It wants to be honored. It wants to be heard without shame. It's the part of you that needs to be told, "You didn't deserve what happened." But you don't have to keep reliving it to prove that it mattered. You're allowed to reclaim the story without becoming the story. Because you are not the pain. You're the one who's finally ready to feel it, without becoming it. If something in you stirred while listening, trust it. These aren't just ideas. They're fragments of a truth you've always carried. Subscribe to Deeper Rewind for more unspoken insights. The kind that don't just explain, but remember you. There's a moment right before it works, when something in you pulls the plug. Right before it's real, you vanish. You delay. You say, "I don't think I'm ready." You were, but something in you wasn't. This is the saboteur, the part that smiles in the mirror while loosening the bolts beneath your feet. It doesn't hate your dreams. It fears what will happen if they come true. It whispers, "If I rise, I'll be seen. If I'm seen, I'll be judged. If I succeed, I'll have more to lose." So it cuts the wire just before takeoff. It cancels the call, misses the deadline, picks the person who feels like punishment. It's not sabotage for attention. It's sabotage for protection. Because somewhere in your story, you learned this. It's safer to disappoint yourself than be blindsided by life. So you destroy the thing you never believed you deserved. The saboteur doesn't scream. It rationalizes. It convinces you this isn't the right time, that you're not good enough, that playing small is responsible, humble, wise. But behind the logic is fear wearing a mask. Jung believed that when we exile a part of ourselves, it doesn't disappear. It waits. And when you finally build something sacred, it tests if you really think you're worthy of it. The saboteur isn't evil. It's ancient. It remembers the moment you were punished for shining, abandoned for asking, mocked for trying. So it built you a cage with velvet walls. It feels soft, but it never opens. Until now, you can meet the saboteur without shame. You can say, "I see why you tried to protect me, but I'm no longer the child who had to fail to feel safe." This time, you don't have to disappear to survive. You're allowed to stay and build and take up space without apology. It's the yes you didn't mean, the silence you swallowed, the version of you sold, so you wouldn't be left behind. This is the prostitute, not the body, the soul. It's the part of you that learned to trade authenticity for acceptance, to give more than you have just to be safe, to say, "I'm fine," when your nervous system is screaming. Because somewhere along the way, you learned a rule: be who they need, or be alone. So you became what the moment demanded: charming, compliant, accommodating. You performed love so you could receive it. You performed peace so you wouldn't lose it. And each time, you vanished a little more. The prostitute isn't about money. It's about survival. It's the wound that says, "If I just give them what they want, maybe I'll finally be safe. Maybe they'll finally stay." But the cost is steep. Because every time you say yes when you mean no, you abandon your boundaries. Every time you betray your truth to be chosen, you reinforce a lie. That your worth is negotiable. That your value depends on what you give away. Carl Jung saw this archetype not as shameful, but as revelatory. It shows you exactly where you've been taught to betray yourself. It reveals the places where love was conditional, where your needs were too big, where your no wasn't allowed. And once you see it, you don't have to play it anymore. You are not a role. You are not a product. You are not here to be palatable. You're allowed to disappoint people and still be good. You're allowed to say no and still be worthy. You're allowed to be seen without being consumed, because your truth is not for sale, not anymore. There's a part of you that still waits by the door, believing someone will come back, someone will choose you, explain why they left, why it hurt. That part never grew up, because it wasn't given the chance. This is the wounded child, not immature, not needy, just frozen. In a moment you couldn't process, in a version of love you had to accept. So it learned to expect abandonment, to tiptoe for affection, to mistrust stability, because it never lasted. The child became hyper-aware, scanning faces, reading tones, anticipating danger before it arrived. It learned that love is earned, that safety is temporary, that asking for more is the surest way to get less. So it stayed small. It adapted. It quieted its needs and called that maturity. But beneath the adult mask is the child still waiting to be held. Carl Jung knew, we all carry this child, and until we meet them, we confuse their fear for our intuition. We think the panic means don't go. We think the silence means I'm not enough. We think the comfort means this will end soon. The wounded child is brilliant. It learned how to survive. It kept you alive. But now, its protection has become your prison. It's why you over-apologize, why you need constant reassurance, why you expect abandonment, even in love that's real. The healing doesn't come from fixing the child. It comes from meeting them with what they never received: safety, patience, presence, a love that says, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. And you never had to earn this. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not who they made you become. You are the one who made it through. And now, you're the one who gets to come back and carry the child out of the story. Not to erase what happened, but to remind them they were never meant to stay there. You may have thought these were just roles: the victim, the saboteur, the prostitute, the wounded child, separate, isolated, moments of weakness to be managed or fixed. But look closer. They are not random. They are not mistakes. They are pieces of the same map, etched in your nervous system by moments you didn't choose. Each one a response to danger, each one a way to stay safe in a world that didn't feel safe. The victim told you don't trust joy. The saboteur told you, don't go too far. The prostitute told you, don't speak your truth. The child told you, don't expect love to stay. And so, without knowing, you began to perform your protection. You lived behind masks that once kept you alive, but now keep you small. You called it just how I am. But it was never you. It was the echo of an earlier version of you, trying to survive without being seen. Carl Jung warned, what you repress doesn't vanish. It reorganizes your life from the shadows. And when these archetypes remain unconscious, you will confuse their voice for your own. You'll make decisions from fear dressed as logic. You'll sabotage joy because it feels unfamiliar. You'll stay in pain because it validates the wound. This is the deeper truth. You're not just living a life. You're living a pattern rooted in grief, disguised as identity. But patterns are not prisons. They are invitations. If you're brave enough to name them, to feel them, to face the versions of yourself you were told to hide, then the pattern breaks, and something ancient begins to shift. Not because you've become someone new, but because you've stopped believing you had to be someone else to be loved. Shadow work isn't a ritual. It's not a trend. It's not a list of things to purge or fix. It's a return to the places inside you that never stopped waiting. It's not about becoming light. It's about becoming whole. Because healing is not ascension. It's descent into the grief, the rage, the longing, the parts of you that were shamed, silenced, or misunderstood. You were told to transcend them, to overcome, to rise above. But Carl Jung knew, what you avoid doesn't dissolve, it deepens, and what you accept becomes integrated. To do shadow work is not to battle the dark. It's to listen, to sit with your jealousy without calling it wrong, to hold your fear without letting it drive, to name your hunger without dressing it in shame. It's slow, uncomfortable, sacred, and it doesn't give you power in the way the world defines it. It gives you freedom, freedom to feel without drowning, to speak without splitting, to choose without being controlled by what you refuse to face. Integration means this: you are not just the victim. You are also the one who can forgive. You are not just the saboteur. You are also the one who can stay. You are not just the prostitute. You are also the one who can say no. You are not just the child. You are also the one who can come back and protect them now. Shadow work doesn't erase the past. It gives it context. It lets you move through life without dragging the same old ghosts into every new room. This is the real work. Not fixing, but remembering. Not performing, but becoming. Not chasing light, but reclaiming what you abandoned to survive. You are not broken. You are not late. You are not behind. You are emerging from the masks, the myths, the survival scripts you didn't know you were living. These archetypes, they were never enemies. They were protectors, messengers, fragments of your story trying to be seen before they were repeated. They weren't here to shame you. They were here to show you where you've been living on autopilot and where you're being called to wake up. Carl Jung didn't want us to fight the unconscious. He wanted us to meet it, to turn toward the inner figures with eyes open and hearts softened. Because integration is not a destination, it's a decision. To stop rejecting the parts of yourself you were told made you unlovable. The shadow doesn't dissolve in light. It softens in understanding. So ask yourself now, which one has been running your life? The victim, afraid to reclaim your power? The saboteur, afraid to be seen? The prostitute, afraid to say no? The child, afraid to expect love and not lose it? Name them, feel them, honor them, and then step out of the role, not to perform another, but to finally become the author. Because your healing is not becoming someone new. It's remembering who you were before the forgetting. And if this stirred something in you, don't scroll past it. Subscribe to Deep Rewind for more truths that feel like memory, for the words you didn't know you were waiting to hear. And share this with someone whose shadow is louder than their voice. Because we all deserve to come home to ourselves, one truth at a time.